Hello back to our Vindicator. If you haven't seen the first parts, you should find them in the right sidebar. Today we're gonna age the decals and get dirty, as we add shadow, depth and rust to our tank. Again, two pictures showing our result to start and check where we're going. We won't paint damage to the decals, as this often looks weird and artificial. Instead, we will damage the decal itself. Therefore, we wet it with our Macrosol. Remember, it softens the decal itself. As we used several coats before, the decal will be strong enough to endure careful damaging. Using a scalpel, we start to scrape away parts of the decal, revealing white color and rust spots underneath it. We can redefine scratches in the white coat and blend the whole decal in very fast and easy. It's important that all our decals are ready before we do the next step, as it will dramatically change the left pure white areas. If we scrape away the decal afterwards, it won't fit in. I use an enamel wash from AK Interactive, but a thinned oil color will do the same. I paint this into all the panel lines and recesses. As we allow this to dry a while before we blend it, you could cover all areas of the tank in one step. This also lets us use the drying time of our first areas. After the wash dried a few minutes and begins to lose its shine, we use white spirit to blend the hard lines into the white surface. You can find white spirit in most art stores, or you could use the web for large doses if you do as many tanks in terrain as I do. If you can, grab the odorless one. We use a soft and clean brush, load it with white spirit and begin to dampen the areas where our wash is situated. The spirit will solve the paint again, so we can remove it from the tank or thin it down and blend it in. If you don't want your base color to change and just the dark lining effect, it is important to seal your model with varnish before. Gloss varnish will provide a slippery surface where the color will slide into the recesses and won't get hold on your main colored areas. I went for a strong effect on the dozer blade, as this is the real eye-catcher on the model. It also gets most contact with the enemy, therefore should be damaged the most. I started with more wash in the recesses and blended it white into the main area, rather than taking the color of the model. The white spirit will also solve some of the pigments, and as we wash and blend, they become part of the white areas. This makes them look alive and kills the boring appearance white tends to have when purely used on a whole tank. Next step are the rust streaks and strong areas of armor being changed in appearance by the rust. Again I use an animal product of AK Interactive, rust streaks, and again we could produce the same effect with watercolors. I'll do a tutorial about using oils instead of the AK stuff in the future, but as we want to paint a gaming model and without spating H's on it, everything out of a bottle is our best friend. Apply the rust streaks using a fine brush. I like to use the slightly dried paint at the edges of the pot instead of fresh paint, as this makes the impact stronger and the streak will be more controllable. Paint the streaks under the rivets, edges and other areas where water would gather and finally run down the tank. Remember to get thinner the more you are away from the rust source, and that random lengths of streaks will look much more realistic than a generic length. After the streaks dried for a while, we use a soft and flat brush to blend them in. Just dampen the brush with a little amount of white spirit and start move the brush up and down without using too much pressure. The more often you do this, the more subtle the effect will be. After a little drying time, you can add more streaks and blend them in again, creating more layers of corrosion. And don't be scared of long drying times. I often read in forums that you shouldn't touch the areas until fully dried, and so on. I'm painting such a tank during one day if I don't film the progress. It's absolutely suiting for armies and our tabletop. As the areas nearest to the ground will see the most intense damage and corrosion, I paint muddy rust streaks on them. Using white spirit, I take the color away in some areas or blend it in others, creating a random appearance. And we're done for today. These steps change the look of the whole model, making the appearance sharper and more defined. Also, the white looks very interesting and full of life now. It's up to you how much you do. Remember, we are painting space fantasy stuff. It's about your taste, not historic accuracy. The next part will show you how the copper-plated areas were painted, and I will add some patina to them. Finally, we will paint the tracks and the last details, like the lenses and wires, and we'll have a really nice centerpiece for our army that will surely get its attention on every battlefield.